All right, so in section 4.4, like I said, we're going to be factoring, okay, review, which means you've seen this before, right? We're going to do 2, greatest common factor in the X method. Now, when it comes to factoring, the first thing you should always try is greatest common factors. The easiest way of doing factoring is just taking out what they have in common, okay? So let me kind of write that down for us right here. To find the greatest common factor, you're going to look for a number and or a variable. So look for a number and or a variable that the expression has in common. Now the thing about this is that if possible, anytime you find the greatest common factor, it's going to make the rest of the problem easier. If it has one, usually it makes it easier to do. Okay? That's why I tell you guys to always try that first, because a hard question, something that looks difficult, could be made really easy by factoring out a common factor. And then all of a sudden the other problem that results is a lot simpler to do. So don't forget about the GCF, okay? That's the greatest common factor. You're going to look for those things first. Okay, now, one thing that I just want to remind you guys of. The word factor, okay? It means to divide. Okay, the word factor means to divide. So when they say let's factor out a 2, what I'm saying is let's divide by 2. Everything gets divided by 2. If I say let's factor out an x squared, that means I'm saying let's divide by x squared. Okay? So I'm going to show you what it looked like when I first learned how to do this stuff, and then after that we can just do it in our heads. But in case you need a little bit of extra visual help, we'll do that. Okay? So here's example number 1. There's actually an A, B, C, and a D. Okay, we kind of go from easier to more difficult. Okay? So write down A and B, or if you just want to do A, that's fine. But the instructions say to factor the common factor. Let's just give you a little bit of time. So we have A, which is 2x squared plus 6. B is negative 6y plus 12y squared. So when we do part C, I'm going to show you guys how I learned how to do this. It's not the most interesting way, but it helped me understand what to do. But the first 2 they're kind of easy. We don't have to do too much for those. So, all right. For part A, this is what you got to do. You're going to ask yourself first, do they have a number that can divide both 2 and 6? Is there something in common that they have? What is it? A 2. So I'm going to factor out a 2. Do they have a letter that they both have in common? No. So I'm going to put a parenthesis here. Okay? Now, I have to fill in the parenthesis with whatever's left over. So if I get 2x squared and I factor out a 2, what's left? Just x squared. If I get a 6 and I factor out a 2, in other words, I divide a 2 out of it, what do I have left? A 3, and that's it, okay? Pretty easy, not too hard to do, but like I said, I'm going to show you guys what I used to do before, but there you go. You factor that using common factors, okay? So if we look at part B, the reason why I gave you a question like part B is because of that negative in the front, okay? Anytime you see a negative in front of a problem, factor that out, okay? So I am going to factor out a negative. And then I'm going to think about the numbers. So 6 and 12, what number do they have in common? They have a 6. And then the letter y and y squared? Well, they have a y. How many y's do they have in common? Just 1, right? Because one of them only has 1, the other one has 2. So negative 6y. Now, I am going to factor a negative 6y, which in other words, I'm going to divide it out, right? So if I get negative 6y, and I divide by negative 6y, what's the result? Just 1, right? Just the 1. Everything got canceled out. Negative 6y divided by negative 6y is 1. Okay? Now, if I get a a positive 12y squared, and I divide that by negative 6y, well, 12 divided by negative 6, that's negative 2. Y squared divided by y, this is a y. Okay. By the way, all this stuff is algebra 1 in terms of division of variables and stuff. That's why I'm not kind of like going over all of it again. But whenever you divide variables, you subtract the powers. That's why a power of 2 divided by a power of 1, that's 2 minus 1. So that's how we get that right there. Now, if you don't like to do it in your head, I'm going to show you the way I learned it. Okay, and you don't have to do it the way I learned it. It's just the way I learned it at first. I don't do it like this anymore. But let's look at that one, part C. So in case you didn't understand how we were doing part A and B in our head, we'll do part C and D the other way, by doing it manually, okay? So negative 4n to the 5th plus 2n cubed minus 6n, that's for part C. Part D is 4x to the 4th minus x plus 10x squared. So if we look at part C, I see a negative in the front, right? So I'm going to take out a negative. Do they have a number in common? I have a 2, right? So I can put a 2 there. Do they have a letter in common? An n, right? And just one of them, because there's n to the 5th. That means that one has 5 of them. N to the 3rd has 3 of them. But then 6n, that only has 1. So they only have 1 in common. And then I'm going to fill it in with the information that goes inside. Now, like I said, I'm going to show you the way I was taught how to do this many years ago. So this is what my teacher used to say. You're going to get your first term, and you're going to divide it by your factor. Get your second term, divided by your factor. And get your third term, and divide that by your factor. And once you get those 3 answers, you're just going to write them in order. Okay? So, what's negative 4 divided by negative 2? That's 2. N to the 5th divided by n to the 1st, that's n to the 4th. All right? Now I go down to the next one. 2 divided by negative 2, negative 1. N to the 3rd divided by n squared. All right? Next one. Negative 6 divided by negative 2, that's 3. N divided by n, it cancels. So my answer that goes inside of that parenthesis is 2n to the 4th minus n squared plus 3. Notice that's what you do when you do it in your head, okay? Exactly what I showed you right here, you normally do that in your head, okay? But if you have a hard time doing that in your head, then just write it out. Just write it out. I'm going to do it again for part D. And if you don't like to do that, that's okay. You don't have to. I'm just showing other people another way. In case they don't want to do it in their heads, they can find a way to do it manually. So, part D, 4x to the 4th minus x plus 10x squared. So, do they have a number that they have in common? Not really, right? They have a 1, but the 1 we don't ever factor out. That's useless. So they don't have any numbers in common. Do they have letters in common? Yeah, how many? One of them, x to the 1st, right? So, all right, I'm factoring by x. So again, if we do this the old-fashioned way, right, if you want to do it a little bit more manually, you're going to get your first term and divide it by x, your second term and divide it by x, and your third term and divide that by x. So 4x to the 4th divided by x is 4x cubed. Negative x divided by x, 10x to the sec. Oh, thank you. 10x to the second. Thank you for that. Make sure I write that down. What was that? Negative x divided by x is negative 1, because the x is canceled. And then 10x squared divided by x is 10x. So my answer will be 4x cubed minus 1 plus 10x. And again, just repeating it one more time. If you don't want to do it this way, you do not have to. You can do it in your head. I know a lot of people just prefer doing that in their head, so that's fine. I don't mind. But I'm just giving you an outlet in case you don't like doing it mentally. Here's how it looks like on paper, right? Here's how you have to work it out by hand. Are we okay with common factors? That's, again, this is like the easiest way to factor, okay? Because all you're looking is for little pieces, right? You're taking out a number, maybe a letter, and you factor like that, okay? But then we move on to this. Not that this is difficult. I know some people prefer the box method, but the reason why we always teach X method is just more common. More people have seen it. That's why we stick with it. But you can do box method as well. But I am going to show you both ways that the X method can be applied, okay? And we're going to do examples that are going to pertain to both ways. So, I'm going to start off by saying given an expression ax squared plus bx plus c. So you're going to be given something that looks similar to that, okay? Ax squared plus bx plus c. And based on your A, your B, and your C terms, okay, you're going to have to write out this X method, okay? So, here's the first one. If A is equal to 1, this is what it looks like. A student once told me like, oh, that's the butterfly method. I learned that before. So I'll show you what they're talking about. On top, you multiply A times C. Whatever A is times C, you're going to multiply that. You write that on top. On the bottom of that X, you're going to put the B value, whatever that happens to be. All right? Now here's the kind of weird part. On both sides, you're going to think of two numbers, and those two numbers together have to multiply to A times C, and they should add to whatever B is. Okay, so those numbers should multiply to A times C. Whatever A times C happens to be, the two numbers you use have to multiply to the top number, add to the bottom number. Okay? So that's what it looks like. As you can tell, they call this butterfly because they're like, well, all I got to do is, put the little antennas, and there you go. Now you got a butterfly, right? So I guess at some point in middle school, a teacher drew a butterfly. Okay? So, but there's two ways you can do this. Okay? That's the first one. The second one looks almost identical with one minor change. So what if A is not 1? What if A is 2 or -3 or -1? Right? Then it looks like this. It's almost the same process, just a little minor change at the very end. So notice I'm going to kind of write out everything I did before. It looks identical so far. But here's the change. All right, so go ahead and draw this out. Right now I'm going to show you the change. So if A equals 1, that's the process we're going to do. If A is not equal to 1, it's the identical process. But you're going to divide your answers by A. That's the only difference. So if A is not equal to 1, it has to be a positive 1. If A is not equal to 1, then we have to divide by whatever A is. Okay? We're going to start off with the easier ones, A equal to 1. And then we'll end off with the other ones where A is not equal to 1. Does everybody have that down? I don't want to move on. Somebody's still writing it. All right, here we go. So, if I want to factor this, notice A is equal to 1, right? So I'm not going to have to do any kind of division. I know I got to do an X method because it's 3 terms. And just for the sake of simplicity, so I know what is what, I'm going to write down my ABCs right here, okay? So I know A is 1, B is -8, and C is 12. I need to know those for the process, so I might as well write them down. Okay? No, you don't have to. Again, it's up to you. But I'm just writing them down just to have them. All right. On top, I'm supposed to multiply A times C, right? That's 1 times 12. That's 12. On the bottom, I'm supposed to write B, -8. All right. Give me two numbers that multiply to 12 that add up to -8. 2 and what? Oh, -2 and -6. -2 times -6 is +12. That's good. -2 plus -6 is -8. Perfect. Do I have to divide? No, A is equal to 1. I don't have to divide. These are my factors. So this is all you have to do to write your answer. You're going to put up 2 sets of parentheses. You're going to write your letter that you're using. So we're using X's, right? So X here, X there. And then you see how my answer is -2 and -6? I'm just going to write -2, -6, and I'm done. That's it. I just factored that. If you want to check to make sure if you did it right, you can distribute it out and see that it comes out the same. But there's the right answer. X -2 times X -6. So now it's factored. Again, this one's easier because A is 1. I didn't have to do anything special. Okay? So let's try another one with the same difficulty. Let's try this one. N squared plus 17n plus 72. And I'm going to write down my A terms right now. A is 1. B is 17. C is 72. Now, I didn't bother asking in part A if they had a greatest common factor. The reason why is it didn't. Does this one have a greatest common factor, like letters that are the same or numbers that they can factor out evenly? Like 17, 72, and a 1 in the very front. Like these numbers don't have anything in common, right? Other than a 1, so we're not going to factor anything out. And all these numbers don't have the letter N. 2 of them do, but not all 3. So they don't have a GCF, okay? But the ones we do next will. I think one of them for sure has a GCF. So, all right, let's do the X method here. So at the very top, I multiply A times C. That's 1 times 72. So that's 72. And on the bottom, I put B. That's 17. Give me two numbers that multiply to 72 that add to 17. 9 and 8. 9 times 8. Knowing your multiplication tables really helps. Okay, by the way, you see how I wrote 9 and 8? When they're positive, I recommend you put the positive symbol on it. That way you know what to put in your factor. If they're negative, put minuses, obviously. Since A is equal to 1, I don't have to divide, so I'm just going to put a circle around this. Okay? And now I'm going to write my answer. So 2 parentheses sets. The letter I'm using is N, so I'm going to put N's right there. And then plus 9, plus 8, and I'm done. Again, these are considered the easier ones, okay? In your homework, I think you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You have 5 of them that I would say are considered the easier ones. The rest of them, the other 7, they're a little bit on the tougher ones, okay? Which we're going to see right now. They're not like tough, but they require a little bit more work. So let me show you one of those. Do these have any numbers that you can factor out? Not really, right? 5, 16, and 3. Can I factor out any letters from all of them? No, right? So it does not have a GCF. Always do that. Always ask yourself, can I factor something out? So I couldn't. So I'm just going to have to do the X method here. Oops, sorry. All right. My ABCs, I'll write them over here. You don't have to do it if you don't want to, but I'm just going to write them up there for us. All right. What is A times C? 15, and my B value, 16. What two numbers multiply to 15 add up to 16? 15 and 1, positive both, right? Actually, let me put this in green here since that's what I've been doing. So positive 15, positive 1. Now normally you'd be done. But if you just circle this and write your answer, you're wrong. Okay? The reason why you're wrong is because remember what I told you? When the A term is not a 1, you have to do what? You have to divide by it, right? So I'm going to divide my answers by 5. That's my A term. See, you could divide the other ones by 1. A was 1. You could have divided, but that's useless, right? But here, it can change answers. So 15 divided by 5, that's a positive 3. That one I'm going to circle. 1 divided by 5 doesn't work, so I'm just going to circle that. Okay, since I can't get a nice answer, I'm just going to leave it like that. Okay? Right now we're going to talk about bottoms up. It's coming up right now. All right, so here we go. So once you simplify it, you're going to do this again. So I'm not changing the process. We're going to put our parentheses there. And we're going to use the letter X and a positive 3 and a positive 1/5. But there's a rule when you factor. You cannot have fractions. Okay, no fractions. So I always tell my students when I teach it, I said bottoms up, get the bottom number. Put it in front of the letter. So this is going to be your answer. X plus 3, 5x plus 1. If it has a bottom, you bring it up, okay? So anything that's a fraction, you're going to get the denominator and move it to the front of the variable. So these are the ones that kind of mess people up because they forget about the division portion. And they give me answers like 15 and 1, and next thing you know, like they don't know why they got it wrong. But the A term, guys, this right here, A equal to 5, that's what makes this problem a little bit more difficult. Okay? If A is not 1, it takes a little bit more time. So we got 2 more to go, okay? The last one is not terribly difficult, but the fact that there's a minus in front of it is kind of a big deal. But let's look at part D, sorry. We got 2 more. Do these have anything in common? They have a 2 in common, right? 2 divides 10, 2 divides 48, 2 divides the other 10. What about letters? Do they have letters in common? No. Now do me a favor. Don't write this down, what I'm about to do. Do not write it down. Okay? If I did not pay attention, this is what it would look like. And I would be asking you, what multiplies to negative 100 and adds up to 48? That's kind of hard, right? There's a lot of things that multiply to 100, right? So I don't want to do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor first. So you can go ahead and write this stuff down. I'm going to factor a 2. And what's left on the inside will be 5m squared minus 24m minus 5. And now, just using the parenthesis, I'm going to do the x method. Do not forget about this 2. Okay, I always say this is like the little brother that always wants to tag along everywhere you go, right? You want to go hang out with your friends, and hopefully you're not the little brother or little sister, because then I'm talking about you. But yeah, you know, the annoying little cousin, let's say, right? You want to go somewhere, they're like, take me, right? That 2 is going to go everywhere that we write stuff out, okay? So don't forget about it. It's tagging along, okay? So here we go. 5 times negative 5 is negative 25, okay? And on the bottom, I put negative 24. All right. Two numbers that multiply to negative 25 that add up to 24. All right. Someone said it, negative 24 and what? I'm sorry, not 24. Negative 25 and positive 1. Yeah, I heard you say under your breath, but I heard it. All right. But I can't leave that as my answer because my A term, if I write it down, is 5. My B term is negative 24. My C term is negative 5, right? A is equal to 5. That means I got to divide by it. So this becomes negative 5. That's one of my answers. And this one I can't divide, so that's my other answer. Okay? Now remember, I did the X method just with this stuff right here. Just the parentheses. Okay? Nothing else. Only the parentheses. The 2 that's on the outside, I just got to remember about it. Okay? But just the parentheses is what I did this with. So here's my answer. 2 parentheses. The letter M. A minus 5 goes here. A plus 1/5 goes here. And the annoying little cousin goes along for the ride. Okay? But I'm not finished because what's wrong with the way it is right now? The fraction. So get the bottom number and bring it up. So 2m minus 5, 5m plus 1, and this is your solution. Okay, don't forget about that number on the outside that you factored. It has to follow along, okay? Has to follow along. So we got one more. And I know, like I said, I know this is a long thing, and I apologize that it's so long to do the lesson. I want you guys to see enough of it, okay? All of these 5 examples that I'm about to do the 5th one, but the last 5 examples, they're all from your homework. So, you'll have those. You can just write them out. The first 4 were just different types. I didn't want to do any of them because they only give you 4 for homework. So, all right, last one here. So, remember what I told you about negatives? Right? I don't like them, so I want to get them out, okay? So, I'm going to take it out. They don't have any numbers in common. They don't have any variables in common. So, I'm just going to write negative n squared minus 2n minus 15. Now that negative again is like that little annoying cousin, right? So you're gonna take it with you no matter what. Has to go. But we're gonna do the X method only on the parenthesis portion. So here we go. We're almost done. All right. My A term, just so that we know. A is 1. B is negative 2. And C is negative 15. Okay, remember the A, B, and C refer to the parenthesis, not the original problem, because or else those are all wrong. Okay? The A, B, and C refer to the thing in the parentheses. So A times C, that's 15, negative 15. Okay? B, negative 2, right? 2 numbers that multiply to negative 15 add up to negative 2.
Negative 5 and positive 3.
All right, negative 5, positive 3, those will work. Okay, normally I'm supposed to be done, right? If A is 1, then I am done. So is A 1? Yes, so that means these answers are good. So I'm going to set up my parentheses here. I put n minus 5 and plus 3 go right here. And don't forget the negative. And you're done. Okay? So this is what your homework is going to be like.